Hi, I want to welcome you to the Children Have Been Going to School Virtually for a Year. Now it's back to the classroom. What do we know about the effects of these transitions on the educational process? And I'm Dr. Susan Shapiro. I'm an assistant professor of early childhood special education at the Graduate School of Education here at Touro. So we've all been impacted by COVID. It's impacted the way that we unpack groceries. It's impacted the way we walk down the street and interact with people. It's impacted handshakes. Virtually impacted everything that we do from day to day. In terms of New York, it's been we've dealt with a lot of fallout. We've had a lot of death here. We've had a lot of illness. We're really working to get it under control, but it certainly has taken its toll on New York City. And when you look around the world, it's really taken its effect on what's going on in terms of the stock market. I mean, you can look at this graph. We don't know what's going to happen from day to day. It's been a very uncertain world since the beginning of COVID. Now, on March 16th, 2020, New York City schools went remote. So no longer was it safe for us to be in person, to have our kids in person. Everyone had to move to a remote platform. Now, we weren't alone in this. This affected the world globally. Children moved from a in-person platform to lots of different platforms to help continue this learning. But this was a global event. So in a lot of different countries, there were a lot of ways that people dealt with this. One of the ways was here in the States, a lot of us went on to online learning. So people already had in place Google Classroom, where they very quickly got it into place. They set up teams. They did lots of things that children could learn online. Around the world, there was a lot of different ways that children did that, and here at home as well. People did take-home packages. In certain countries, a radio station, the children would turn to a radio station at a certain time of day, and the teacher would be there, and they would do the lessons for the sixth grade and another set of lessons for high school. And that was also done on television, and that was done throughout the world as a way to support children as learners during this time where we couldn't be in person anymore. Now, although we switched over to these different platforms, here in the States, especially in the United States, we saw that a lot of children just weren't showing up. So, if you look in terms of 100% of children coming to school every day, that only accounted for 9%. So especially when we look at children being affected by poverty, you could see a lot of children just weren't coming in at all. So the less that families were making, the more that children were disappearing. This had an extreme effect in terms of children's learning. Another thing is when they showed up, they weren't engaging. So they were on, but, we see that 27% or, even 40% said that it was worse than before. They weren't having the same interactions with the kids. The kids weren't engaging. They might have been there, but it doesn't mean they ever participated. So we know this had to have a huge impact on what was going on with children learning. Now, there's another reason why children weren't coming on, not just that it wasn't exciting or fun anymore. One of the big problems was children were dealing with some very major issues. They were dealing with poverty. They were dealing with issues with getting enough food. They were dealing with being evicted from their homes. So while we wanted them to concentrate while they're online or watching TV or taking home the packets, children were dealing with some very harsh realities, which definitely impact what was going on with them. In a recent poll, we can see that 71% say that the pandemic has taken a toll on the mental health of their children. So not only were children not engaged in school, but they were dealing with real fallouts from crisis. This even went over to children who weren't living in poverty. This was children who were middle class, upper class. Every single person globally was affected by what went on during this global pandemic. And it really took the toll on children whose entire worlds were turned upside down. They were no longer socializing the way that children should be. They were no longer having interactions in the classroom. Children were going hungry. We can see that 6 to 7 million children additionally had malnutrition. They were not getting their vitamins. They were not getting health services. This was a huge problem. So some programs did step in and try to do some remedial work to try to catch children up in terms of academics. Although that was not the primary issue, it was a major issue that children were dealing with. But the poorer the countries, the less actual remedial help these children have been getting. In New York State, we have the Summer Rising program, where we're trying to make sure that children can have that segue between the pandemic and going back to school. But we don't have stats on that right now. We'll see how much that helped as time goes on, at least to help with socialization. So what do we know about the effects on this transition on the educational process? Well, we know that poverty and bias are going to play a big role in terms of the need for remedial support. So children who, didn't have internet access, who didn't have computers. We know that children went through a huge amount of stress, and they will need support, and their parents will need support in order for them to recover as students. We know that every student walking into the classroom in September will have a learning deficit, whether it is from not being able to get on or not being engaged. And we're going to need to be prepared in case remote structures come up again. So this probably will not be an isolated case. As we know, the Delta variant has been striking in schools. Classrooms will close down. So in order to help children with this transition, we have to realize the transition is not over. So these are some tips that we can use as educators go back into the classroom to help with success. So the first one is you need to be gentle. They need to really understand that everybody has come in with crisis, and they really need, including teachers, including families, they're going to need to have supports built in. Children haven't been socializing for huge periods of time. That needs to be built into the curriculum. And children actually will need assistance in learning to socialize again. Some of the children still haven't seen a child their own age for over 16 months. We need to realize that every single children is coming in with a deficit, and we need to be prepared to deal with that. School communication has certainly changed. We've spent a lot of time online, talking to parents, using Google Classrooms here in the state especially. We want to make sure that we keep that ongoing, especially as families still deal with fallout stressors from the pandemic, such as homelessness and food insecurities. We need to be speaking with them. We need to be sure that we don't throw away any advances made with our online learning and teaching so that we can support children as the world still remains topsy-turvy. Thank you so much.